different cause that we support, that we try to make more well-known, or from creating awareness to raising funds and everything. But there's but what we are best at as a group, as this big family here, is by making people feel things and turn that feeling to action. If you could tell us what kind of feeling, if there was one feeling that the world needs today, that if you could unite everyone, the billions of people that we all talk to together as agencies, as clients, and with all the advertising power of the planet, if we could unite people around one feeling, we have made people feel hope, happiness, create tolerance, but what is the one feeling that you would like to see the world feel today in a single way?
Mutual empowerment. That is, how do you get 1 million people to give 5 or 10 euros to solve a natural disaster and rebuild an education system? How do you get disheartened Greeks to get up tomorrow morning with something to look forward to instead of thinking it's going to be another day of bad news and life will be a long, boring, broken record? How do you get people in Egypt not to be discouraged about the fact that the reformers who caused the end of the old order had almost nothing to say about the new order because others had been there organizing for decades and they don't know how to do that yet? Every single frustration is based on a sense of disempowerment. And how do you get somebody in a rich place to care about somebody in a poor place? If you believe that your futures are bound up together and that their kids are just as smart as yours are, then you should be committed to empowering them. And the reason I said mutual is most people who live in most wealthy countries think they have all they can do every day to hold on to their own jobs, to do their own work, to raise their own kids, to pursue their own dreams. And many of them, in spite of the success of the text funding of disasters or crowdfunding in the UK and elsewhere, are not sure they can make a difference. And I think we have to have an empowerment ethic that tells people how they can make a difference from where they are, wherever that is, and explains to people that it's worth trying because of who they're trying to help. That's what I believe. I think that would make a huge difference. It's a terrible thing for people to get up in the morning and start the day by looking in the mirror and thinking nothing good is going to happen today. It will be just like yesterday, and tomorrow will be too. People need something to look forward to when they get up in the morning. They need to believe that it'll be an exciting day. They need to believe that they can make something happen. People in general are instinctively very smart about their own lives. They don't expect miracles. They just like a little progress. They don't expect 24-hour transformation. They like the beginning of change. And I think, making people feel they can do that, you can do that, and it's a big deal.
If there's one term that this industry is obsessed about, is with the term big idea. And I think that few people in the world have probably seen more interesting people with big ideas than you. If you could tell us, what is a big idea for you, and what are the biggest ideas you have seen recently?
Well, the first big idea is that all social and economic challenges are best addressed through diverse networks of cooperation, not by the dominance of labor over capital or capital over labor or conservatives over progressives or vice versa. If you look at Brazil, one of the reasons I bet on Brazil as a rising country that is likely to succeed is that, not that they don't have any problems, they have two huge problems: dueling environmentalisms in Brazil. They're in their fifth year where they're the only large country or small country in the world where more than half of their transportation fuel is from sugarcane-based ethanol. It's by far the best biofuel in the world. You get 9.3 gallons for every 1 gallon of oil required to make it. And it does not use rainforest land. You plant sugarcane where there's deep topsoil. And the rainforest has very thin topsoil. But the more of the deep topsoil they take, the more they push the cattle ranchers and the soybean farmers into the rainforest. About 3 years ago, the Association of Ethanol Producers, this would never happen in America right now, invited me to come down there because they were worried sick about what they were doing to indirectly tear down the rainforest. And they wanted to know what they could do to continue to go through to a clean fuels, less carbon-oriented society without eroding the rainforest. Even more impressive, Nizan and I last year were in Manaus on the edge of the rainforest at a conference dealing largely with the second dueling environmentalism, which is Brazil's growing like crazy. They need more electricity. 85% of their electricity is clean electricity from hydropower. But the only rivers that flow deep and hard enough to generate new hydropower are now in the rainforest. And there are plans for 3 new dams there. The problem is, if you build the dams, you'll tear down a lot of the rainforest. And in the process, in the biggest site, destroy a legally protected 2,600-year-old native tribe. And the tribes are very important in Amazonia. They are the custodians of the rainforest. They know how to live in it, live off of it, and preserve the biodiversity. And nobody pays them to do it. Mostly they just want to be let alone. But this is important. Now, here's the thing about this Brazilian conference. Nobody pretended there was an easy answer. But when I got there, sitting around tables together were the heads of every oil company, every utility, the leader of the Green Party who ran third in the race for president in Brazil last time, representatives of environmental groups, representatives of the native tribes, every conceivable interest group in Brazil, all the stakeholders were there, and they were sitting around talking to each other respectfully and trying to figure out what they should do next. Not to get a perfect solution, but to get the best available solution. And I was so encouraged because in my country, we've been so bedeviled since in the last several years by this incredible partisan divide. We just nominated a guy, you know, we didn't, I didn't, but the Republican Party nominated a man for the U.S. Senate in Indiana who defeated the most senior Republican in America on foreign policy, attacking him for cooperating with President Obama on foreign policy. Ever since World War II, every United States senator has been willing to work with the president of the opposite party to advance America's national interest around the world. This guy lost his seat in part because of it. And in his victory speech, the nominee said, "We have no business compromising its weakness. Our worldviews are too different. We have to keep going until we force the American people to choose." Compromise is bad. The Brazilians know better. So I think the process is important. And that's what I would say to all of you. If the places in America that are already back and prospering and doing well are places where there are creative networks of cooperation between government and business and a rising NGO community. And it's true over and over around the world in poor countries at large. Rwanda rose out of the ashes of the genocide from having a per capita income barely above $200, even 4 years after it was over, up to about $1,100 a day. 10 of the 20 fastest growing economies in the world last year are in 2010. We don't have the 2011 figures yet. 10 of the 20 were in Africa because of where they have transparency and honesty and openness and creative cooperation, they're doing well. So that's what I think people need to know. And I think that's a big idea. because all of you do it every day in your own work. How many times do you come up with a good ad by sitting around the table and talking about it? By batting your ideas around, by sharing your ideas, by listening, somebody else says something that gives you an idea. In a complex world with a lot of variables, there is wisdom in diversity. And differences of opinion are important, actually, but they only work if the goal is to reach an agreement. All the political differences, all the intellectual differences, all the philosophical differences, they really do matter because nobody's right all the time. You can do a funny ad about this. Nobody's right all the time, and a broken clock is right twice a day. And all of us poor human beings are condemned to spend every day of our lives in the gray area between. We're almost all right more than twice a day. We're never right all the time. Therefore, if you throw us into the cauldron of all the complex world problems we face, we're more likely to get a good answer if a bunch of us are swimming in that gray morass together.
One of the greatest things and most important things that has been shaping the advertising, changing the advertising industry during the last 5 years is how international the business is, and how small shops from a single place can suddenly become a global player, as long as you were saying, you can have the world within your walls. You can bring, because it's hard to do that remotely, but once you bring the whole world to a single place, you can come up with ideas that talk to the entire place, to the entire world. One challenge that probably 80% of the agencies on the palette have been facing is that in order to bring people bring people from all over the world to a single place, you also have to deal with the fact that the world is in the countries and the cities. They're all trying to protect itself from getting new workers from other places, because that's going to take jobs from themselves. There's this conflict that is much bigger than us as agencies and individual groups, but is there a way that to influence on a national level or on a global level to create a better way to let people collaborate and move and work in different places to welcome more when the overall feeling is actually to put them away?
Well, the short answer is yes, but it's never going to be in the near term without challenges. First, I think I want to talk about the immigration issue, but let me say something else. If you want small firms to prosper in a global economy, they need two things. They need access to the internet with adequate download speeds so they can actually function in cyberspace. And then they need a government that does what Germany's been very successful at doing, which is organizing medium and small-sized companies to work together to export their products and services. So I think that's really important. One of the challenges we face in America is that we now have dropped to 15th. And though we pioneered, we had more cell phone penetration quicker than anybody else. We never organized cyberspace in a way that we had rapid and uniform computer download speeds. So now South Korea's download speeds are 4 times ours, and they rank first. And almost all the Asian countries are ahead. So you need that. Then you need a structure, something like what the Germans do to get the small and medium-sized companies. Then you need a steady flow of labor. But let's be honest, there are two problems here. One is the fear of being displaced. The other is a fear of fundamentally changing the character of the country. And we've just been through a horrible period, I think it was horrible, in America, where the anti-immigration forces had the upper hand, mostly because of the fear of being displaced, because of the economy. And we're beating them back. You may have seen that President Obama made what I think is a very important announcement saying that nobody could be deported if they had been in America more than 5 years and were in school or at work and under 30 years of age. That's a huge deal for us. And I think it's really, really important. Look, here's why immigration is important. You also may have seen that Mexicans involuntarily been going home because Mexico grew faster than Brazil did last year and much faster than America did, so a lot of Mexicans think they got a better deal back home. And if I were Americans, I would be a little nervous about that. But essentially, here's the deal. The richer a country gets, the lower its birth rate goes. If you're worried about overpopulation, put all the girls in the world in school and give all the young women equal access to the labor market, and the birth rate will drop. In every culture, without regard to religion, it always happens. It always happens. You don't have to have any of these fights that other people have over the other issues. The problem is that it drops below replacement level. Look at Italy, home to the Vatican State. Right? We're against contraception, and our birth rate's about 1.7 and replacement's 2.1. So, if you want to continue to grow your economy, the only option is to take in immigrants and diversify your societies. In the United States, we have allowed a real shortage of people trained in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In our own country, too much of our best talent was siphoned off to other things, principally finance in the last 20 years. We know if we close the gap between women and men and between males of African American and Hispanic descent and males of European, Asian, and Middle Eastern descent, that is, if everybody could rise to the European, Asian, Middle Eastern level of participation in these subjects, we wouldn't have a shortage within 5 or 10 years. Meanwhile, every person we let in our country with the training in these areas to go to work or start a business adds more than 2 jobs when they come in. So the economics is just wrong. And I think we should keep our doors open. But, you know, France got nervous because 10% of their population is now born in North Africa, moved into France, and they worry about whether it will change the character of the country. You've seen all these fights about how women have to dress, or should there be requirements or restraints on what women can wear or not wear in public, and all of those things. You're going to have to deal with all that. But the truth is, all of us in wealthy countries where the populations are stagnant, if we want to keep growing, have to figure out how to deal with that. The United States, because we've been more open to immigration, is younger than Europe. Only Ireland is younger than America, of all the major countries in the EU, and younger than Japan. In 20 years, unless they change the one-child policy and the immigration policy, we'll be younger than China. So it's something that we all have to think about. This is a problem that we will all have to grapple with. There are no easy answers, but I think that what I would urge all of you to do is to try to keep the borders as open as possible and try to search for the kinds of understandings that the next generation, you know, people my age, it doesn't matter much what we think. We're not going to be around that much longer. And we get preoccupied with other things. But I think younger people have to reach understandings about what is essential to the character of a nation, what kind of values have to be accepted, what kind of tolerance has to be there, not only on the part of the host nation, but the immigrants. And then you need to get the show on the road. Because if you shut it down, you are consigning yourself to a more limited economic future. Also, we should not try to hold immigrants if their countries back home start doing well. I'll give you just one example. In the United States, less than 2% of our African American population is Haitian. Not our total population, our African American population. But 11% of our African American doctors are Haitian. So their ability is beyond question. They come from a country that's never had a good political system. A stable and transparent government, a secure government, a good investment environment. I'm trying to help fix all that now. And if a lot of them decide to go home, we should welcome that as well. But as long as you keep your doors open, enough people will come seeking opportunity to allow the countries that have great social capital and intellectual capital and financial capital to continue to grow and do well. If you shut your doors, sooner or later, demography will be destiny, and the places that are growing will go by. So I think immigration not only makes life more interesting, even if challenging, it also is essential to prosperity.
Sure. One last question here. Now, talking about the influence, how the economy ends up changing and influence so many of our decisions. And this industry is also very dependent, and we suffer or celebrate every up or down of the economy because our clients change what we work with every day based on how the economy is about to go. Do you see this economy going down, up, or should we just reset the ideas of what high, low is going to be for the next couple of years?
Well, the honest answer is I don't know. But I spend a lot of time every day thinking about it and trying to learn about what's going on. Here's what I do know. In the last 500 years, whenever a given nation has suffered a collapse of its financial system, it has taken between 5 and 10 years to return to full employment so that incomes begin to grow. For the last 200 or so years, since buildings have been widely held in private hands, that is, corporate headquarters, small businesses, and individual homes, things like that. If the financial collapse is triggered by and accompanied by a mortgage collapse, it almost always takes about 10 years. In Japan in 1990, the bubble burst on commercial real estate. And because a consensus was not possible to be reached about rapidly restructuring the bank and rapidly flushing the debt, and the Japanese decided to limp along with it and instead to invest massive amounts of money in modern infrastructure and run a debt that is now over 200% of GDP, the largest in the world, which they could do because of their enormous private savings rate. After a decade, they still hadn't returned to full employment and rapid growth rates. So it depends. I think if we have too much austerity now, it will lengthen the amount of time it takes to recover for a simple reason. In the strong economies, interest rates are already, in effect, below zero. They're below the rate of inflation. 2 weeks ago, I just pulled the German interest rates, for example, and you could borrow, you could have a 1-year note from the German Treasury for 1/10 of 1%. You can, in other words, you could borrow €1,000,000 for 100 euros a year. And that's like saying, I'm going to pay you to keep my money safe. In America, it was 0.25%. You borrow $1 million for, $250 a year. And so I think we need to recognize that in that environment, more austerity and cutting back on public spending in the short run will make things worse. If you look at the experience of the UK, you see if interest rates are zero and there's no private activity, then almost always what happens is no matter how much you cut spending, revenues will drop more because unemployment will go up and mandatory expenditures to care for the unemployed will go up and fewer taxpayers will be there. Which is why I think the appropriate thing, and what I hope will come out of the last French election and all these debates in Europe, and I hope will persuade others, the appropriate thing to do is to have a very tough long-term plan to reduce your unfundable liabilities, your debts and deficits. A structured plan to require all countries to have reasonable tax systems so that people actually pay whatever the law says they're supposed to pay. That's been one of the problems in Greece. They didn't have a good tax collection system. But in the next year or two, to focus on continuing making targeted investments and not doing things that contract the economy and make it worse. If there were Euro bonds, you wouldn't necessarily be able to borrow at German interest rates anymore. That's one of the things that caused problems in Greece and elsewhere. But they'd still be lower than would be available to any individual country. If America adopted its infrastructure bank, the same thing would happen. We'd get the money at very low interest rates. We could invest it. It would build long-term credit. We could pay the debts for investment off for a long term, which is acceptable now. And I'd like to see my country adopt a very tough 10-year plan to bring the debt down, but not to start until growth was clearly underway and private sector growth offset public sector shrinkage. If you just hang around and wait for the economy to grow, everybody will be forced to reduce their debt anyway because there'll be so much competition between the public sector and the private sector for capital. Interest rates will go through the roof and throw the economy into a tailspin unless you reduce debt. But that is not the problem now. The problem now is that there is no demand. People are still afraid. There's not enough happening. And there's too much human capacity going to waste every single day in most countries in the world. So I favor a careful expansionary policy now and debt reduction that's very strong later. And if the investors are worried about whether that's possible, adopt the plan now and specify the circumstances under which it will be implemented once growth is underway. That's what I think the right thing to do is. You've got to get the sequence right. And if you mix it up, then you'll just drag this thing out. I mean, you look at the American economy now has got in a to and fro between the president and the Tea Party House, essentially, the House of Representatives. So we have in 27 months, 4.3 million new private sector jobs. So for 27 months, we were creating jobs at about the same clip as were created in my 8 years as president. And everybody thought, wow, we're coming back. Then the American people get worried about too much government. They get the Tea Party, the House of Representatives, the Congress, and they say, we are not going to support any of President Obama's spending plans, including aid to state and local governments to keep teachers and firefighters and police officers on the job. So we have 4.3 million new private sector jobs, and we lose 657,000 public sector jobs. Slowing it down, then people get worried about it, then private sector stops investing again, and we slow down again. So I think, you know, my view is invest now, but adopt now a plan to bring down the unfundable liabilities, but don't start to bring them down until growth is underway. That's the right way to sequence it, I think.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your words and also for